You don't deserve a penny, Dad. Mom never loved you anyway." Those words came from my daughter, Emily, at the reading of my ex-wife's will in a small law office on the square in Bloomington, Illinois. The air smelled faintly of old leather and fresh coffee, but her words made it feel like every molecule in the room had frozen solid. My son, Daniel, sat beside her, arms crossed, his face carved in stone. The lawyer, a man named Richard Collins, cleared his throat and looked at me with raised brows, as if waiting for me to react. But I didn't. I just sat there, staring at the mahogany table, the hum of the ceiling fan rattling above me. Let me back up. My name's Thomas Hayes. I'm 64 years old, a retired auto mechanic, and for most of my life, I believed family meant everything. I spent decades sweating under hoods of Chevys and Fords in a little garage off Route 9, making just enough to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table. My ex-wife, Margaret, and I were together for nearly 30 years. She left me 10 years ago after saying I'd never be enough. She remarried a real estate broker in town, the kind of guy who wore tailored suits and polished loafers even at the grocery store. I swallowed my pride, signed the divorce papers, and walked away with nothing but my dignity and a rusted pickup truck. But I never stopped being a father. Birthdays, graduations, first apartments, I was there. Paid for textbooks when Daniel couldn't afford them in college. Bought Emily her first car, even slipped them cash when they were starting out. Still, sitting in that room, listening to my own children dismiss me like a stain on the family name, I realized something bitter. They had chosen Margaret's new life over me. Before I continue, if you're new here, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Richard opened the folder, his voice smooth and deliberate. "The last will and testament of Margaret Louise Hayes." Emily shot me a glance full of venom, whispering to her brother, "He thinks he's getting something." "Just wait." Daniel smirked. I didn't say a word, but inside a storm was brewing. Because what they didn't know, the piece they were about to choke on, was that Margaret's estate wasn't as straightforward as they thought, and I wasn't as powerless as they believed. Emily leaned back in her chair, arms folded tight, as if she were already celebrating her victory before the lawyer had even finished. Daniel tapped his foot impatiently, his polished brown loafer clicking against the hardwood floor of the old office. Richard adjusted his glasses and continued, "Mrs. Hayes leaves the family home, located on Ashwood Lane, to her children, Emily and Daniel Hayes, to be divided equally." Emily's lips curled into a satisfied smile. Daniel gave a sharp nod. Both of them looked at me like I was an outsider trespassing on their fortune. Then Emily spoke, loud enough for Richard to hear. "See, Dad, just like I said, you don't get a thing. Mom knew you'd try to weasel your way back in, but she made sure of it." Her words were coated in triumph, but they hit me like gravel thrown at a windshield. I steadied myself, clasping my hands together on the table. Richard wasn't finished. "However," he said, pausing deliberately, "the property is to be transferred according to the terms of the deed. And as some of you may not know, the deed has a rather complicated history." Emily's smirk faltered. Daniel leaned forward, brows furrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" Daniel asked. Richard tapped the folder. "It means, legally speaking, the house may not pass as smoothly as you expect. Margaret remarried, yes, but the original deed," he looked directly at me, "still bears the name of Mr. Thomas Hayes." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the faint creak of the fan overhead. Emily slammed her hand on the table. "That can't be right. Mom divorced him years ago. The house was hers." I finally spoke, my voice steady but low. "I built that house with my own hands, laid the foundation myself, back in '87. The mortgage was paid off before the divorce, and the deed, well, let's just say Margaret never bothered to change certain things." Daniel's face reddened. "You mean to tell us you've been sitting on this all these years?" You let Mom live there with her new husband, and you never said a damn word? I met his stare. It wasn't my place to ruin her happiness. Or yours, but now, you're the ones pushing me out, Emily scoffed. Oh, please. Don't act like some saint. You just want money you don't deserve. You were a lousy husband and a worse father. All those nights in the garage instead of with us? You don't get to play hero now. Her words stung, but I bit back the anger bubbling in my chest. Years of sacrifice, dismissed in one sentence. Richard cleared his throat again, trying to calm the tension. There will need to be a formal review of ownership. Until then, no property can be transferred. Emily shot up from her chair. This is ridiculous. Mom wanted us to have the house, not him. You can't just let him block this, Daniel added. We'll fight this in court if we have to. I leaned back, folding my arms. Do what you have to, son, but be careful what you're willing to uncover. Margaret's will is one thing, but the law is another. The look on their faces, shock, disbelief, and a flicker of fear, told me everything I needed to know. They weren't prepared for the fight ahead, and truth be told, neither of them had any idea what else I had tucked away, waiting for this very moment. Daniel's jaw clenched, his face turning the same shade as the red brick buildings outside the lawyer's office window. Emily paced the length of the table like a caged animal. This is a joke, she muttered, her heels clicking against the hardwood. He doesn't even deserve to be here. Mom would never have left him anything. I watched her, calm as a lake before a storm. For years, I let them push me to the sidelines. Birthdays where I was barely invited, Thanksgivings where I sat at the far end of the table, like some tolerated neighbor instead of their father. I had swallowed every slight. But not today. Richard, the lawyer, shuffled his papers. The truth is, Mrs. Hayes never filed the quitclaim deed to remove Mr. Hayes's name. Technically, he remains co-owner. That gives him rights. Rights that override certain instructions in the will, Daniel snapped. So what? He's going to move back into Mom's house? Over our dead bodies, I leaned forward, my voice steady. I don't want to live in that house, Daniel. I don't even want the memories. But I'm not about to stand by while you both spit on the years I gave, the sweat and money I poured into that family. Emily stopped pacing and turned to me, her eyes sharp as broken glass. You think you can scare us with this? Mom's husband will back us up. He has money, lawyers, influence. You're just an old man with nothing. That one landed deep, but I let it sit. Sometimes silence speaks louder than shouting. Because Emily was wrong. I wasn't empty-handed. After the divorce, I'd kept my head low, saved what little I could, paid off debts quietly. And when Margaret's second husband made flashy investments around town, buying rental properties, I'd been watching. I'd been talking to people, and I had something they didn't. Time, patience, and an old mechanic's habit of keeping records. I turned to Richard. Suppose I want to contest this. What would it take? Emily groaned. Oh God, here we go. Richard adjusted his tie. You'd need to formally file with the county clerk. The deed is already in your favor. But to assert full ownership rights, you'd need proof of the original mortgage payments and improvements made. I smiled faintly. Improvements? I've got every receipt from that build. Lumber from Miller's Yard, shingles from Davenport Roofing, even the down payment check written in '87. I kept them all. Daniel's eyes narrowed. Why the hell would you keep all that? Because, I said slowly, I knew one day someone would try to erase me. And I wasn't about to let that happen, Emily scoffed. So what? You're going to drag us into court? Ruin what little family you've got left? Over a pile of papers? I met her glare. No, Emily. You already ruined the family when you decided I didn't matter. This isn't about money. This is about respect. Richard slid a business card across the table. Mr. Hayes, if you want to move forward, my office can assist. But I should warn everyone, this could get ugly. Once we file, the court will review not just the deed, but the financial history. That means every loan, every lien, every unpaid tax connected to that property. That was the moment Emily's confidence cracked. She glanced nervously at Daniel, who shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I caught it. The flicker of fear they were trying to hide. They knew something I didn't. Something about the house, the finances. I leaned back, folding my arms. Funny thing about old houses, they've got secrets buried in their walls. And sometimes, those secrets come out when you least expect them. Emily's voice trembled despite her bravado. You're bluffing. I didn't answer. Because the truth was, I wasn't bluffing. I had no idea what they were hiding. But I could smell it, like oil leaking from an engine. Faint, but undeniable. And if my children wanted a fight, I was ready to strip the whole machine down until every dirty bolt was exposed. The church hall on Main Street was buzzing that evening. Low murmurs, the faint smell of coffee and polished wood filling the air. Word had spread through Bloomington that the Hayes family was having a private estate review meeting. I arrived early, my coat buttoned tight against the September chill, and slipped quietly into the back pew. Emily and Daniel were already there, flanked by Margaret's new husband, Richard Carrington, who radiated confidence in his tailored suit. He didn't know it yet, but his empire had cracks, ones I had been mapping for months. The lawyer, Richard Collins, cleared his throat. Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin, I must remind you that any interference in this process can have legal consequences. Emily scoffed. We're not interfering. We're just protecting what's rightfully ours. I stepped forward slowly, every eye in the room now on me. The murmurs grew louder. Protecting? I said, my voice calm, measured. Let's be clear, this isn't about what's rightfully yours. This is about what's legally mine. Daniel's eyes narrowed. You can't do this here. Mom's wishes. Mom's wishes, I interrupted, holding up a folder. Funny how wishes can't erase decades of proof. You see, I kept every mortgage payment stub, every home improvement receipt, every check I wrote. And according to the law, that house, the very house you've been squabbling over, is still partially mine. Richard Carrington's confident smile faltered slightly. The room fell silent. Even the pews seemed to lean in. Emily blurted, That's impossible. Mom wanted us to have it. I shook my head. Margaret may have wanted that, but intentions don't change ownership. And intent doesn't erase legal records. The lawyer cleared his throat. Technically, Mr. Hayes can assert full ownership unless the co-owners can provide evidence to the contrary. Daniel stumbled over his words. But there's more than just the house. Mom's savings, her investments. I let him finish, then calmly replied, Yes, and some of those investments were in your stepfather's name. Funny how easy it is to hide debts when you're trying to look rich. Funny how easily a small-town lawyer can trace them back when the real story comes out. I slid a folder across the table toward Richard Collins. I've compiled everything. Mortgages, bank statements, even the contracts your father-in-law filed to transfer properties. The truth is all here, and when you start digging, it all unravels fast. Richard Carrington's face turned pale. Emily's jaw dropped. Daniel's smug arrogance was gone, replaced by panic. Are you saying we could lose everything? Emily whispered, almost to herself. I didn't answer immediately. I let the weight of the moment hang. The murmurs in the room grew, curious neighbors and distant relatives whispering, sensing the family drama unfold like a slow-motion train wreck. Then I spoke, voice steady and unflinching. You built your pride on lies and arrogance. You humiliated me, ignored the years I sacrificed for you, and dismissed me like I was nothing. Now you'll see, nothing stays buried forever. And sometimes justice doesn't come quietly. It comes like a storm. Collapsing under the weight of my evidence, Richard Carrington swallowed hard, muttering, I didn't realize. Emily and Daniel sank into their chairs, faces drained. Their whispers turned into frantic muttering, realizing just how badly they had miscalculated. The lawyer shook his head. I suggest a temporary halt on any transfers. Mr. Hayes has the right to pursue full legal review. I gave a faint smile. Not a victory yet, but satisfaction. They were seeing me for the first time, truly seeing me. Not the old man they had mocked, not the useless father they had ridiculed, but a man who had quietly held the power all along, and the storm hadn't even hit its peak. A week later, the court convened at the McLean County Courthouse. The air was heavy with tension, the smell of polished wood mingling with the faint trace of courtroom coffee. Emily and Daniel shuffled nervously into the room, their expressions forced, brittle with panic. Richard Carrington's tailored confidence had crumbled into a stiff, awkward posture. I entered last, quietly, with Richard Collins by my side. No fanfare, no grand gestures, just calm, measured dignity. The murmurs from the gallery rose immediately. People in Bloomington had been following the saga, and whispers of the Hayes family drama had spread like wildfire through the town. The judge, a stern woman with silver streaks in her hair, peered over her glasses. We're here to address the ownership of the property formerly owned by Margaret Louise Hayes. Mr. Hayes, you may proceed. I stepped forward, holding my folder of receipts, mortgage records, and improvement contracts. Your Honor, this property, this house, was built and maintained largely through my labor and finances. The deed, as you'll see, still bears my name, which grants me co-ownership. I seek to assert my rightful claim, not out of spite, but to ensure that truth and law are honored. Emily burst out, voice trembling. This is insane! Mom wanted us to have it. You're just an old man trying to steal from your own kids. I looked at her, calm, measured, every syllable deliberate. No, Emily, I am asserting what has always been legally mine. And you, with your arrogance, have ignored the years of sacrifice it took to make that house a home. Daniel, attempting to interject, was silenced by the judge's firm gaze. Order in the court, she said. Mr. Hayes, please continue. Richard Collins presented the documentation. Mortgage payments, contracts, and bank statements tracing every improvement I had paid for over the decades. The courtroom fell into a hush. The judge flipped through the pages, frowning as she noted the thoroughness. This is comprehensive, she said finally. Mr. Hayes, your claim is legitimate. Pending final review of the financials, you are entitled to at least partial ownership. Further transfers of the property are suspended until this review is complete. Emily's face went pale. Daniel's hands trembled as he adjusted his tie. Richard Carrington's confident demeanor had entirely vanished, replaced by a mix of frustration and disbelief. I exhaled slowly, a weight lifting from my chest. I wasn't here to humiliate them, though seeing them squirm was not without its satisfaction. I was here to reclaim the respect I had been denied for decades. After court, outside in the crisp autumn air, neighbors gathered, offering quiet congratulations. A few muttered about how the arrogant children had finally been humbled, how their father's quiet patience had turned the tide. I walked back to my truck, feeling the warmth of justice settle in my bones. Emily and Daniel were left to navigate their anger and embarrassment, forced to confront the consequences of underestimating their father. I didn't need a mansion, or an inheritance, or validation from anyone but myself. The peace of knowing I had stood firm, the quiet dignity I reclaimed, was reward enough. As I started the engine of my old pickup, I glanced back at the courthouse. The autumn sun reflected off the windows, golden and forgiving. Some battles are not about revenge. They're about proving your own worth when everyone else has counted you out. And in that moment, I knew. Decades of loyalty, sacrifice, and patience had finally been acknowledged. Not with words, but with undeniable truth. Justice had been served. Tell us your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories.